What is happening, everyone? It's Tyler Pyburn here with Phil DiMartino. We're from 5 Tool Productions. It's been a hot minute. We've been busy. We've been absolutely
maybe 2
crazy.
minutes.
Yeah, 2 minutes, 2-3 months. So it's definitely been a while for sure. But we're back, and we want to kind of kick this back up again and get the ball rolling as far as our internal content was concerned. And when we're talking about internal content,
What an amazing segue.
we're
What a
actually I didn't
transition.
even mean to do that. But we're talking internal communications because from our perspective, it's been interesting. A lot of the people that we've been working with have actually been internal communications, whether it's someone on the HR side, the
Yeah.
hiring, training and development. We've been working with a lot of those folks recently.
Yeah, I think we've seen an increased focus in it for a lot of the clients that we've been working with, which is really interesting and really encouraging. And I think there's a lot of reasons for it. It's a really positive development. And I think there's a lot of really interesting stuff we can do. We're going to talk about some case studies today. But what jumps out to you is kind of, we talked about this before we started recording, what's kind of the basis of all this and how you think people should be thinking of content from an internal comms perspective?
So this is really, the whole topic is really content marketing for internal communications. That's kind of the overarching topic that we're going to cover right now. But what I think about when a company gets to a certain point of employees, we're not talking mom and pop. You don't need to create, content for you and me.
You joke. We'll get to that in a
But
minute, though.
it
There's
is a possible-
value there too.
Yes,
but different kind of stuff.
We've seen kind
Yeah.
of the, your enterprise companies that are, hundreds and thousands
Right.
of employees that are scattered, not just there in one singular location. They are kind of maybe even globally for a lot of them. They need content on a regular basis to kind of encourage people to engage in the company. I mean, we've seen how many studies of people that said that when an employee is engaged, they work better for that company.
Stick around
They
more,
stick
retention's
around
better.
yeah, just a little bit of everything is better, right? So I think it's what's good for the goose is good for the gander, right? It's good for everybody. If we can get people more engaged in the company, it's going to be better as a whole.
Yeah, I think one really simplistic way to look at it is like if you were running a business and you had, say, 5,000 customers or 10,000 customers. Obviously, there are going to be some that are potentially more important than others in terms of how much revenue they bring in, but you're going to treat them all as if they need to be engaged. You're not just going to ignore some of them, right? And I think the same thing really goes for internal comms. And sometimes companies, probably don't think of it that way where their employees are customers or clients, right? And in a lot of ways, if you care about retention, you care about engagement, you care about your employees putting out good work, you probably should be thinking of it that way and thinking about what can we do through content to engage these people as if they were clients? How can we provide value to them? How can we make them feel good? How can we stay in front of them?
And get people to know one another, right? I mean, I
Right.
know large companies that we worked with, they'll have mixers where they invite people in, but how many times do you walk through and you say, I have no idea who any of these people are that I actually work with because they're on a different floor than I am. They're in a different wing, or sometimes they sit, even just 10 spots away from them, but because they're so busy and there's so many people that they interact with on a day-to-day basis, they don't actually know them. So it's kind of, it all kind of reminds me of college where you say, I went to a school that I said I didn't want to be just a number, right? I want people to know my name and have an understanding of who I am. So the content that can be created is something that can also get people to know one another a little bit more and have that interaction without actually having them get up, go over and say, hi, how are you? I'm Tyler, I'm Phil, right?
Right, and there's a barrier to entry for people to do that, not only because people are shy or whatever, and people naturally there are walls up, but it's also just a time thing, right? And it's a location thing, like you mentioned. So it's not just about like, we're playing up to millennials and people are soft. Like people work differently now than they did 20 years ago. You might have people working remotely who never come into the office. You might have people who work from home 3 days a week and don't get to see different people. You have people working remotely. It's not everyone centered in this one office. And you're getting all this FaceTime with people. People work a lot differently now than they did 10 or 20 years ago.
Definitely.
And because of that, you have to find ways to link people together.
Well, you mentioned that, how many CEOs have we heard say, I have an open door policy.
Right.
If you have an open door policy for 30 to 40,000 employees, one, you're never going to have any work done.
Right.
And two, they're not all in that same building that you happen to be in, especially if you're traveling an awful lot.
Right.
So things, and we'll get into the different types of content that can be created, but by having even a quarterly meeting be live streamed across all your different locations, you're giving those people FaceTime with you that allow them to ask questions live right then and there. Right?
We've worked with multiple clients who've used the all hands meetings, the quarterly meetings, these types of things as opportunities to get that FaceTime for senior leadership out in front of their remote offices. So sure, that open door policy might be great where you are, in your headquarters, like you mentioned, but when you're going to go to the effort to put on an all hands meeting, streaming it live can be a really good way to make people feel engaged. Recording it and getting it out is great too.
Yep,
and that's a great step, and maybe that's a level of comfort you have. But streaming it live can also add an element where people really feel like it's an event and they're part of it, and they can ask questions and there's an interaction there.
So a great example of this, and we can kind of get into some of the examples right now. We happen to be streaming an event up in Bangor, Maine. So middle of the state of Maine, we were up there, and the CEO, the two founders, walked through the door, and they were treated like they were celebrities.
Oh yeah.
They were, people were cheering for them, and it wasn't forced. It was like, wow.
It's genuine, yeah.
Genuinely cared and really loved the founders of the company, because they said, you created 1,000 or so jobs for us up here in the middle of Maine, right?
Right.
And they loved that. And to that point, the live interaction, it felt like an event was taking place. It wasn't that they were just here for kind of a town hall and we'll speak to the audience right here in Bangor. They then streamed that to across the country, across the globe, and they're allowed to have questions from people that are across the globe. So while everybody that happened to be in Maine is asking questions, people in Germany are asking questions as well. Hey, this one came in. So it kind of has that true engagement that's really authentic, that it's not forced at all, and it's not just, hey, we just did something, go watch this video after the fact. Right? This is, no, you're a part of it right now, even though you don't happen to be here in Boston, in Norwood, Massachusetts, where we are today, right? Like, they could be anywhere for that.
And that's kind of like a large scale event. And I think there's examples of internal content that can be used, thinking of it in the content marketing lens, on a more regular scale, and even just access to senior leadership. I think about things like, if you work at a big company, the director of product, for example, how often are you going to talk to the director of product? Probably not all that frequently, unless you're in their direct department and you report to someone who reports to them. But if that person can regularly kind of just take 5 to 10 minutes out of their day to sit down and tell the camera, what's the big initiative in their department this quarter? What are they working on? What are the things that matter to them? It's going to help you be a lot more aligned across the company with that person's team. So it's not just like, oh, I want FaceTime with that person. It's also knowing that the left hand is talking to the right hand, and the work you're doing.
Keeping everybody in the loop with all the content, with all the things that are going on how often, especially there's so many moving parts to different, for every company, large and small, that sometimes people feel like they're left out.
Well, and it's easy to put your head down and just work.
Yeah.
And maybe what you're doing is actually not serving the company as well as it could be if you knew where leadership stood and what the strategy was directly from them, right? A lot can get lost in communication along the line, between managers and middle managers, and kind of hearing this stuff directly from executives and people who are driving the strategy can make sure that you're not just head down kind of going west when you should be going east, right?
Exactly. Well, and you think about it, if you're using the product manager as a great example, you might be telling the outside world these things already and saying, hey, here's what we're releasing this right now. You should be telling your employees that and more, and letting them know and getting excited. Hey, everybody. And some people have just an email chain, which is fine. Some might have a blog post or something. But if you almost vlog it in a sense and have someone just come in, or even on your laptop, and say, I'm just going to record this 2-minute video and say, hey, good morning, everybody. It's me, your product manager. I want to let you know here's a status update of how things are going. We're super pumped that we're on target, we're on budget, and the skies are going to open up soon, right, for us. So, but just things like that to just touch base with everybody, let them know how things are going, and keep that excitement and live engagement going.
Right, and from a value add perspective, I think there's other things like training videos and stuff like that that are both tied directly to your job to make you be able to do your job better, but then also helping people grow as people, right, and showing that you value people for who they are, not just for the work they do. And you know, that's the number one thing. When you talk to people who work at companies where there's good training resources, that's something that keeps people working at a company for a very long time, and it makes people feel really valued. And you can really extend your ability to do that at scale if you kind of think of it as content marketing and think about how can we use, you know, video and email communications as opposed to just doing in-person trainings, which are a huge lift and it takes up a lot of man hours. But you can do a lot of that through video and, you know, digital communications as well, so that you don't always have to have someone at the front of a room teaching a class, but you can still, you know, get some of that value out to folks.
Well thought out training resources make companies efficient.
Well, yeah.
Bottom line.
And it makes people stay there.
It makes people stay there because it also gives you, if you have that content, I mean, I use this example all the time. If you have someone go up and do a training, right? It happens every other Monday or happens the first Monday of every month. That just happens to be about Outlook, right, for lack of a better thing. On Outlook, how to use Outlook. Someone doesn't remember everything. What do they have to go do? They have to go send an email and ask.
Go talk to the trainer.
Go spend time, go talk to the trainer.
Give them the resources for the most commonly asked questions to follow up on that training.
If that's there for them, right there, you're not taking anybody else's time. You know where it's located. You know how to go find it. It's pretty simple. The other piece, you know, to use an example, and it's not one of our clients, but we saw it recently that was really, really well done from an HR perspective, is Apple. So Apple recently put out, I want to say 3 or 4 different videos of just employees. And I'm sure their thought process was kind of twofold for internal communications, but it's actually started serving great for hiring and recruitment. And I actually saw it from a few friends that happen to work for Apple. They were sharing it out and saying, meet so-and-so from Apple. And it wasn't about why they loved working at Apple so much as it was, I like to be creative. Here's me in my element. And oh yeah, I'm also creative at Apple.
Right.
I love to take pictures. Here's what I do photography on, right? I love landscape photography. But when I'm at Apple, I also like to...
My job lets me do this thing I love.
Allows me to do that too. And it kind of, you saw it, the people that I know that were sharing it from Apple were saying, yeah, I'm glad I got to know this person that I work with.
Yeah.
Hey, you should join our team too.
Right.
Right. So it was kind of serving 2 different purposes there, which I think is a great thing that shows internal communications can also actually work as external marketing too.
Yeah, and I think the thing that worked well with that was that it goes back to the thing we always talk about, which is show, don't tell.
Yep.
Right. Don't just say, if you come work at Apple, you're going to get to be really creative. They're really just showing these people who are musicians and photographers and everything else and get to use that in their daily life and enjoy that part of their life while they're at work also. So they're showing you, you know, you get to be a creative person when you come work here. And that's a really powerful thing for the vision of the company just generally when you think about whether or not you want to purchase their products, but then of course, especially from a recruiting standpoint.
And you're seeing it from other companies as well, right? Facebook just launched a series as well that it's not video, wish they'd call us and do some video with us, but they're doing blog posts, right? And they're talking about different people and allowing people in the company to have a voice. And I think that's another thing that's important is by creating this content from an internal standpoint, you are not just allowing your company to have a voice, but to allow the employees to have a voice as well.
Definitely.
And that's incredibly powerful because if they're all speaking the same message, you're drinking the same Kool-Aid together, they're all going to be saying something very similar, and it's going to be very powerful coming from someone else inside the company, not just from the top down itself.
Definitely, yeah. I think focusing on people is always the key, and it's telling their stories. Stories and people, that's what works.
It's pretty simple. All right, he's Phil, I'm Tyler. Thanks so much for tuning in. We'll see you next time on the 5 Tool Video Podcast.